voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
Yet, despite the fact that the deadline for action has come and gone, no sanctions have been imposed, waived, or delayed pursuant to Section 231. How can you explain this?
The section that I believe you're referring to has been delegated to the State Department, so I can't comment for Secretary Tillerson on that. I can comment on the portion that we were responsible for, which was the oligarch report that we did deliver on time, and as I testified in the Senate, there will be sanctions coming out of that report. And again, I want to commend the work that was done on the Intelligence Committee on the classified version.
Who's responsible for delegating what was passed by an overwhelming majority of this House to the State Department?
The President was.
So the President decided that despite the fact that in the law that we passed delegated responsibility to Treasury, that he decided that he wanted it to be delegated to the State Department rather than Treasury, and this is your excuse for not having implemented the law. Is that correct?
No, it's not my excuse. And again, I believe, but we'd be happy to sit down with you and go through the details of this. The President had the authority to delegate within that as he chose fit. Again, the portion that you're referring to was delegated to the State Department. The other portion was delegated to us.
But the final conclusion is that nothing has been done. There has been no waiver. There has been no delay. There's not been anything that has been done. You did not waive or delay sanctions. That is the conclusion, whether we're talking about Treasury or the State Department. Is that correct? Nothing has been done on sanctions.
Again, there's been, on our side, there's been an enormous amount of work done. I want to commend the intel community, and there will be sanctions that come out as part of that. I can't comment on the State Department's part of the package.
Would you describe the enormous amount of work that the Treasury Department has done that you just alluded to? What have you done?
Again, I would encourage you to look at the classified report. It is incredibly extensive. It is a work product of the Intel and the Treasury, and that work product is now being used for the basis of developing sanctions.
Are you telling me that in your response to the overwhelming majority of this Congress having created law to impose sanctions on Russia that undermined our democracy, that your response is classified? Is that what you're telling me?
Again, what I've said is part of the report was unclassified, part of the report was classified. I assure you that as it relates to the work being done at Treasury, there will be sanctions. And again, there is a lot of ongoing work that is being done to develop those sanctions, and we complied with the law on time.
The Congress of the United States does not know what you are doing. The Congress of the United States does not expect that your response to the public policy that was developed by us be somehow responded to in a classified way. Is there anything that you can tell us that you have done?
Well, again, the law called for both a classified portion of the report and an unclassified. Given that the majority of the work was developed on a classified basis, we classified the report. I'd encourage you and other members to look at it. It's an extensive amount of work. again, that the first phase was to develop the report and deliver it, which we did on time, and now we are developing sanctions on it. So I assure you we are very focused on this.
Well, I would encourage you to encourage the president to declassify any information that should be forthcoming to this committee, just as he was able to do in the Nunes memo. He used his power of the president to declassify. I would suggest to you that if information is declassified, that should be available to this Congress, who voted overwhelmingly for sanctions on Russia, who undermined our democracy. Those sanctions should be not delayed or waived, and we should have information about it.
It is Wednesday, February 7th of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and it is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Or it could simply be an egg dish with hollandaise, in which you will be adequately capable of smothering that Benedict. And you'll feel happy for it. We always do. Okay, so a French-style military parade? Does he not know what Bastille Day is? I mean, come on. This is the guy that keeps telling everybody, let them eat cake. And he wants to be honored. Does he not know what Bastille Day is? Oh, my God. Okay, apparently not, but the joke will be on him. Oh, boy, it sure will be. Oh, my gosh. Okay, well, I guess military parades it will be, even though the military equipment will be too heavy to drive on the streets of D.C. Tear them up. But it doesn't matter. Oh, God. Well, maybe, if we're lucky, by July 4th, when he wants this parade, the clang and ringing of the barred doors in some federal lockup will be resounding in his soul, the depths of whatever soul he's got. We can only hope, and hope always comes to fruition by good works. So maybe by that time we won't have to worry about a parade, because this guy and his cronies, and I'm looking at you, Mike Pence, will be where you deserve to be. Okay, well, I should get into what we have on the rest of the menu today. Of course, Maxine Waters smacking Steve Mnuchin because the task of the Russian sanctions fell to the Treasury Department. And, of course, Mnuchin, he was told what to do. And he was just following his job. He was just doing his job. The banality of evil, folks, is just doing your job. Okay, on the rest of the menu here, starting off in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That ex-cop and Bundy occupation militia leader, well, there was a few of them, but this one is Brandon Richard Curtis. Yeah, this guy faces 266 years in prison after stealing $87,000 from his business clients. Property management company, collects rent checks, doesn't turn them over to the owners of the rental properties, pockets the money like they're not going to find out. Jeez. Well, that's the kind of leader in the militia movement that they have. Mike Pence, yeah, I'm looking at you, Mike Pence, was in charge of the Trump presidential transition, but his name is suspiciously absent from any records of it. And Justices Ginsburg and Sotomayor just sent a big signal that partisan gerrymandering is going down. Well, after the break, we'll move to the chef's table to scrutinize West Virginia's billionaire governor and his war on anti-poverty programs. And just days before the opening ceremony, serious health concerns hit the Winter Olympics. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. First offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Bob Brigham out of Raw Story. Idaho militia leader and former police officer Brandon Curtis was arrested on 19 felony counts of grand theft, the Idaho Statesman reported yesterday. Now, Curtis was the founder of the militia group 3% of Idaho and the Pacific Patriots Network. He is facing 266 years in prison. Well, he might get some time off for good behavior. Maybe. A 2-year investigation by Idaho State Police concluded that his two businesses, Curtis Property Management and Liberty Property Management, stole $87,000, which is a lot of money in Idaho. Lots. By collecting rents from tenants but failing to deliver the money to the owners of the homes and the apartments that he managed. Jeez. Wow. I guess he's going to lose his real estate license now. In California, you have to have a real estate license to be able to run a management company. I think even to work in one. Certainly to run it. Prior to property management, Curtis spent 2 years as a reserve officer, a total of 4 years at the Nez Perce Tribal Department, and 5 years at the Orofino Police Department. Both, of course, are in Idaho. Curtis had traveled to Oregon to join the Bundy occupation of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge. In 2016, 36 members of 3% of Idaho resigned, alleging Curtis had taken money raised for 4 Idaho men arrested in the 2014 Bundy Ranch standoff in Nevada. This movement of theirs certainly attracts the grifters, doesn't it not? Curtis allegedly used the group's PayPal account for $295 sent to Roland Smoke Diesel, a company that provides aftermarket parts that allow diesel engines to produce thick clouds of pollution just to show everybody how much of a dick you are. Oh my God. Other purchases including a camping reservation, Taco Bell, and an iTunes music download. This guy's a bottom feeder. Jeez. I don't know. It's stealing tips off the counter. What is this guy? Well, okay. Curtis is being held on a $150,000 bail. His first court appearance is scheduled for today. So I don't know how it works in Idaho, but is his property not being confiscated at this very moment? Because if he has ill-gotten gains, what has he purchased with his ill-gotten gains? Huh? They do that. Okay, well, it couldn't have happened to a more deplorable. Next dish here in the Bistro Cafe is Out of Share Blue Media by Oliver Willis. Pence's name is mysteriously missing from thousands of emails from the transition he led. My speculation is, have they been scrubbed? Or has he been purposely left off? Yeah, I don't know. So Mike Pence was the head of the Trump presidential transition team, but his name is mysteriously missing from emails during that period. Investigators on the House Intelligence Committee say they have looked over thousands of emails from the transition team, but cannot find Pence's name. The committee has been tasked with investigating the emails as part of its examination of Russia's election interference. Interesting, isn't it? Now, Pence's missing mentions raises questions about how much transparency is truly being offered by the Trump team, and if his role is being covered up to protect him from fallout from the investigation. Well, if we lose Trump, we get Mike Pence. They got Sonny, and then you got Michael. Pence's unusual disappearance from the emails during this period raises questions about his role in the vetting and hiring of Michael Flynn. It was during this period that the transition team was told by Representative Elijah Cummings that Flynn had lobbied on the behalf of a foreign entity. And of course, they all went back into their huddle and said, well, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted him to do. We can't win this without help from Putin. Are you kidding us? We need all the stops to be pulled out. We need influence. We need, a little bit of, what's this new movie out now? Red Sparrow? Yeah, let's get a little bit of that going. We need to actually have spying networks in consort with people like Carter Page. Banking types who were part of a spying network who were busted in 2013, and Carter Page was all part of that crew. We need those guys. We need money, influence, Common-Pratt, election manipulations. Yes, they did that. Why else would they hack in? Why else would voting rolls be hacked into? How is that? So, Mike Pence has a plausible deniability. He was supposed to lead all this. Well, it's soon after receiving that information, the Pence-led team nonetheless gave Flynn the rubber stamp to become Trump's national security advisor. They needed a back channel to the back channels to Putin. One that went around the established intelligence channels and diplomatic channels. Too cumbersome. It soon became public knowledge that Flynn had been in communications with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the transition, lied about it, and was purged from his position after serving only 24 days. Well, it's the 17 days after everybody knew about it. That's what I want to know. The fallout from his tenure has continued to plague the Trump team. Pence has repeatedly tried to evade blame and responsibility for his role in vetting and hiring Flynn. Flynn recently pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI and is reportedly cooperating with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian election meddling and the Trump's campaign's related role. It seems unusual that during a transition period in which so much happened, with key figures like Flynn and the Russian ambassador and documents warning about Flynn that were received by the committee, that Pence's name has disappeared. Yet, the omissions follow a pattern where Pence has tried mightily to separate himself from this disturbing and scandal-plagued episode with the Trump team. He has insisted that he was not aware of collusion between the Trump team and Russia. Yeah, I wasn't aware. I mean, there was stuff going on. I didn't know about it. I mean, Mother told me I couldn't be in the room with a bunch of men even, unless she was there. And she didn't get a security clearance for some odd reason. I didn't know what to do. When confronted on the campaign's outreach to Russian operatives, Pence has always claimed that happened before he joined the presidential ticket. If an email showed Pence's name in connection with vetting Flynn, his carefully orchestrated and constructed narrative where the Russian scandal does not taint him would quickly collapse, but conveniently, those emails cannot be found. Well, I think the email suffered one of those convenient heart attacks, or one of those convenient polonium poisonings, or one of those convenient falling out of a 5-story window moving a piano, but you don't have a piano. Finishing up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Ian Millhiser. Now, it seems to me that Justices Ginsburg and Sotomayor have laid down a gauntlet. And they have a formidable, shall we say, debating style. Yeah. Nevertheless, they persisted in spite of the obstacles forever put in their way. Well, the Supreme Court handed down a fairly routine scheduling order yesterday that, at least on the surface, looks like dozens of brief and uninteresting orders handed down by the court every year. But there is one particular order, folks, however, that contains a big hint about what may be the most important case of the current Supreme Court term. It suggests that partisan gerrymandering is about to be declared unconstitutional. That's right, you heard it, unconstitutional. Okay. The case in question, Rucho versus Common Cause, centers on congressional maps in North Carolina. Last January, a panel of 3 federal judges struck down North Carolina's maps as an unconstitutional partisan gerrymander. Republican leaders in North Carolina requested a stay of this decision from the Supreme Court a few days later, which the court granted. Shortly after the court had granted the stay, the plaintiffs in the case filed a motion asking the Supreme Court to place Rucho on its argument calendar and establish, this is a quote, establish an expedited schedule for merits briefing and oral argument, end quote. Had the court granted this motion, it would have potentially allowed the justices to decide Rucho quickly enough that, if the court ultimately decided that North Carolina's maps are unconstitutional, new maps could be drawn in time for this November's election. Unfortunately for opponents of gerrymandering, the order handed down by the Supreme Court yesterday denied this request to expedite the case. As a practical matter, this means that the case is likely to be heard next term, too late to prevent North Carolina's gerrymandered maps from being used in the 2018 midterms. Now, of course, is it any secret why there are no sanctions against Russia? Why there are no protocols or fixes to our electoral system so it can't be hacked? Why the influence campaigns continue unabated? And they also need gerrymandering. They need it all. It's the only way. But I will also remind folks, it really only works on the margins. When the sheer numbers of us, we need more than 3 million this time. What's especially interesting about yesterday's order, however, is that Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sotomayor both dissented. They would have granted the request to hold an expedited hearing on Mnuchin. There's no way to be certain why exactly Ginsburg and Sotomayor disagreed with their colleagues, but the most likely explanation is that despite this temporary setback in Mnuchin, the court is about to hand down very good news to opponents of partisan gerrymandering. Last October, the court heard oral arguments in Gill versus Whitford, a challenge to Wisconsin's gerrymandered state assembly maps. At that argument, a majority of the court appeared ready to declare for the first time that a partisan gerrymander violates the Constitution. 4 months later, it is likely that drafts of the majority opinion and the dissent in Whitford have already circulated among the justices. Absent a last-minute change of heart by a justice in the majority, Ginsburg and Sotomayor know how this case will turn out. If Ginsburg and Sotomayor know that the court is about to uphold the Wisconsin gerrymander, it is very unlikely they would want to place another partisan gerrymandering case on the court's docket. Ginsburg and Sotomayor are probably the most liberal members of the Supreme Court. If Whitford is going to end in a loss for them, they would not want to compound that loss by taking up another similar case. But if Ginsburg and Sotomayor know that the Wisconsin gerrymander is going down and that the court is about to usher in a legal revolution that will sweep away many unconstitutional gerrymanders, then they most likely will want that revolution to move swiftly. The most likely reason why they would want the North Carolina case to be heard on an expedited basis is because they know that they won Whitford, and they want to win Mnuchin fast enough for it to matter in 2018. And that brings us to our break, which we should get to, and we'll meet you on the other side and give you the weather and finish up at the chef's table. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. The rise in technology, particularly for information and communication, is radically transforming lifestyles. For example, many people can now work from home and still be in almost constant contact with the office. Or maybe you prefer your own couch for watching a recently released movie, rather than trekking to the local theater.
This technology-induced lifestyle changes affect how people consume energy and ultimately affect the energy demand of the nation.
Ashok Sekar, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Texas, Austin. To assess how our changing use of technology might alter our energy consumption, Sekar and his colleagues first set out to determine how much more we're in our homes than we were in the past. For more than a decade, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has surveyed how Americans spend their time each day. More than 11,000 citizens respond to the survey each year. Crunching the numbers from this survey, the researchers found that Americans are definitely logging more hours in their living rooms.
When compared to 2003, the year 2012, Americans spent 8 days more at home.
That's 7 fewer days spent in non-residential spaces and 1 less day spent traveling per year. And that's on average. The younger generation exhibited even stronger homebody tendencies.
The population aged 18 to 24 spent 2 weeks more at home in 2012 compared to 2003. Which is 70% higher change than the average population.
And that shift in location translates into surprisingly large energy savings. The researchers calculate that Americans are reducing energy use by 1,200 trillion BTUs by not hopping in our cars. And we're saving 1,000 trillion BTUs by skipping public appearances at the mall, movie theaters, and the office. The study is in the journal Joule. That's Joule, which, like the BTU, is a unit of energy. Now, obviously we still use energy while at home, but not all activities are equally draining when it comes to our dependence on the power grid.
Activities at home on average takes less energy per minute compared to time spent in your car or commercial buildings.
To save even more energy, SACAR suggests we focus on improving the energy efficiency of home appliances and consumer electronics, the stuff we use more when we're working from home. All day. In our pajamas. See? We even saved the energy we'd otherwise expend getting dressed. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. At the time the Constitution was written, public schools as we know them did not exist. Children who attended school usually received a great deal of religious training. In fact, their parents expected the schools to give religious instruction. There has been growing disagreement about whether religious teaching should be supported in public schools. During the past 70 years especially, the U.S. Supreme Court has heard many cases dealing with this subject. The Establishment Clause requires that government be neutral toward religion. Government cannot support one type of religion over another type, nor can it support religion over non-religion. The courts follow guidelines when deciding whether government is complying with the Establishment Clause. They look at three factors. First, the courts examine whether government is actively endorsing religion. Second, the courts examine whether government is compelling people to participate in religious activities or to accept religious beliefs. Third, the courts examine whether government is providing special treatment to one type of religion that it is not providing to other types of religion. If government fails any one of these factors, it is in violation of the Establishment Clause. In a recent case, for example, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a high school could not require its students to participate in a prayer at their graduation ceremony. The court concluded that the high school, by requiring the prayer, was endorsing religion and compelling the students to participate in the prayer. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Do you know how many women are locked up in America today and why they are behind bars?
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The answer, 219,000 women today are behind the razor wire, according to a recent joint report authored by the ACLU's Campaign for Smart Justice and the nonpartisan nonprofit criminal justice reform group, the Prison Policy Initiative. Let me share some more deeply disturbing facts. Of the 96,000 women locked up in local jails, 60% of the women have not been convicted of any crime, but rather are sitting in cells because they cannot afford the bail. Not surprisingly, pretrial women who are locked up have an annual median income of just over $11,000. For black women, the figure is about $9,000 per year. Do note that of the women who are locked up and unable to make bail, often for drug or property crimes, about 80% are mothers, and most of them are the primary caretaker. The take-home is pretty straightforward. The time has come for nationwide criminal justice and bail reform. Wouldn't you agree?
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Donald Trump bragged in 2016 that, quote, "I know words. I have the best words." Well, occasionally he does use some very fine words that convey great promise, as in this sentence. I'm going to fight for every person in this country who believes government should serve the people, not the donors and special interests. Trump also declared he would, quote, "drain the swamp" to rid Washington of those creepy, crawly special interest lobbyists. Excellent words. But they only matter if the speaker actually means them, backing their rhetorical promise with action. As we've seen, though, far from draining the swamp, Trump converted the White House itself into a fetid cesspool of lobbyists, corporate executives, and banksters. His transition team was almost exclusively made up of those swamp critters. His glitzy inaugural celebration was bankrolled by big oil, big coal, big pharma, and other bigs that attached their legislative and regulatory demands to the checks they donated. Most of his top officials come straight out of Wall Street and corporate suites, turning Trump's government into a sump pump that is routinely funneling billions of dollars and special regulatory favors to the moneyed elite. When asked why he put Wall Street hucksters in charge of economic policy, he offered this scramble of words that inadvertently revealed his true plutocratic soul. I love all people, rich or poor, but in these positions, I just don't want a poor person. This is Jim Hightower saying, really? Not even one official who understands poverty from first-hand experience and could not only give you advice, but also some understanding? And what about those hard-hit middle-class workers Trump always talks about? Nope, he hasn't appointed a single one to a top policy position. So forget Trump's words. If the poor and middle class aren't in his government, they're not in his heart either, nor in his policies.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Tuesday, February 6th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. The Conservative government in the UK is systematically dismantling large parts of the public service. I talked to Mark Sawatka about what the UK government has been doing. Mr. Sawatka is the General Secretary of the Public and Commercial Services Union. PCS is one of the largest unions in the UK with about 200,000 members. I asked Mr. Sawatka to describe what's been happening to public service workers in the UK.
So unfortunately, the past few governments in the UK, and this goes back to the last days of the Labour government, and then the coalition government, and now the Conservatives, have tried to make massive job cuts of their own workforce in order to address some of the economic problems that the country has. And what that has resulted in is that we have seen, in the last 7 years alone, 120,000 civil service jobs lost. We have now the smallest civil service in Great Britain since the Second World War. And the effect of that has actually meant that the services that our members are able to deliver have been massively cut, that the public find it much harder to access benefit payments or to get tax advice than they did before because there's less staff to deal with their queries. And it means that those people who are left are actually working in very stressful conditions with huge workloads and struggling to cope. Now, in a rather sinister development, on top of the job cuts that the government is making, they decided over the last sort of 12 to 24 months that another thing it could do to cut money was to embark on a huge closure of office program, an office closure program throughout the UK. So on top of job cuts it was making, it decided to save further money by literally closing buildings. And we are now faced with over 130 tax offices being closed, nearly 80 job centres, dozens of county courts, ministry defence bases being closed down in parts of the country that is causing real economic distress for places that are so remote from the southeast of England that actually the market economy in this country cannot deliver private sector jobs. So what this means is that a political consensus of over 50 years in Britain, which is to use the public sector to create skilled jobs in parts of Scotland, in the northeast, South Wales, in Devon and Cornwall, that it's very hard to get private sector jobs. The public sector has been used to give people a chance and to have trained jobs in communities. That is now being withdrawn. So apart from people losing their jobs, apart from the public getting worse services, we're seeing swathes of the UK where now government offices are empty, and that is affecting private shops and businesses as the economy shrinks in places that are really struggling. So it's been devastating, and that is why we're campaigning locally, and we've had some strikes to keep offices open, but we're also campaigning nationally for for properly staffed public services in all parts of Britain to give the public a service and to allow people to have a future where they can get a public sector job, trained and secure in the years ahead.
What is going on? Britain, after the Second World War, was known as a leader in the development of quality public services, such as the national health system. Why is the government attacking its own workers and the services they provide?
So in a word, it's austerity, and it's the financial crash that we witnessed across the world in the early 2000s. And we have seen that the politics that people of Britain have been subjected to, and in many other countries, is that because we've had an economic crash, then actually the people who we are going to make pay for this are not the ones who caused it, not the financial sector, not the people with the millions and the billions, but the people who deliver public services. And we've seen very short-term, ideologically driven decisions on the back of the crisis to seek to shrink the state and to shrink the public sector. And it means that a country, as you said, that has actually been renowned as investing properly in public services and public sector employment has completely now turned around. And it is a country that now actually sees its public services as the way to try and save money.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We've broken down and cleaned up the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And now that we are comfortably ensconced, we shall offer a palate cleanser, which is weather from around the world. And we start along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. It's currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit, and it even feels like 29 degrees. It was chilly when I went out into the garden to check. Now, this is how people catch pneumonia and all sorts of other weird diseases. We're going to get up to close to 70. Oh boy. And then we'll, they say 44, but they said 44 yesterday, and now we're down to 29. Go figure. Dry conditions are obviously, or ostensibly, will continue because it's a little wet outside because of the humidity, which is at 87%. It's a light drizzle, low-lying clouds. We, as I said, we're supposed to get a low of 44 tonight. I don't know. We'll see. I think it may be colder. High tomorrow of around 70. Winds will be light and variable out of the south-southwest. Air quality is good, though, at 27 parts per million. It's just right on the cusp to becoming moderate. So if you do have breathing problems, you should head inside and breathe filtered air. It would be good for you. Okay, and these warmer temperatures will prevail for the foreseeable forecast. Now, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people live around the world. London is 42 and partly cloudy. Paris is currently 32 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 49 and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 27 and cloudy. Kabul is 37 and fair. Hong Kong is 50 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 36 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 69 and clear. San Francisco, California is 57 degrees and clear. And New York is 30 degrees Fahrenheit with a light snow. All right, so about 5.5 more weeks of winter for you, and that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. They put them on their property somewhere. It gets hooked up to the net, the data-driven satellites that are giving us everything that we need to know. And these people live around the world. All right, first dish offered up here at the chef's table is by Greg Kaufman out of Think Progress. Months after rejecting a Kentucky-style work requirement for Medicaid in West Virginia, Governor Jim Justice, no relation, now seems to be moving in the opposite direction. With assistance from the Conservative Foundation for Government Accountability, the FGA, an American Legislative Exchange Council ally, ALEC, and an affiliate of the Koch-funded State Policy Network. You know, they study the Soviet model so well. It's so nice how they've appropriated it to get what they want. The apparent switch is nothing new for Justice, no relation, who made a leap into politics when he ran for governor of West Virginia as a Democrat in 2016. 9 months after winning, Justice, no relation. The richest man in West Virginia, it's a small swimming pool, I think, okay, or pond, as they want to say, and the state's only billionaire, a much smaller pond, he's the biggest fish there, announced at a Trump rally that he was switching to the Republican Party. Today, Justice's Department of Health and Human Resources, now I have the Justice Department, the U.S. government has the Department of Justice, and this guy has the Justice's Department of Health and Human Resources. No relation. Is pushing a series of bureaucratic barriers to public assistance, including a 3-month time limit for unemployed and part-time workers receiving food assistance, or SNAP. A $2,250 limit on cash and assets that would penalize families receiving food assistance for modest savings and a hefty contract for a private corporation to determine the assets of every member of a recipient family. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody put a quarter in your hat. You're over the limit. You'll have to pay us thousands of dollars now. Or you can work it off in our work program that we just happened to set up for the likes of you. DHHR has already awarded Optum with a contract of $300 million over 10 years to verify eligibility for temporary assistance, food assistance, Medicaid, and other programs, even as a bill that would create such a system is still under consideration in the state legislature. That's nice. That legislation would incentivize the corporation to kick people off of these programs. Shrink government to the size where you can drown it in a bathtub, my friends. Okay. Requiring it to demonstrate greater savings than the cost of the contract in the first year. Oh, that's nice. You're paying us, how much was it again? The $308 million? Oh, $300 million over 10 years. First year, I got to show you that I'm kicking more people off than we're bringing in. We can do that. We got lots of practice, and I bet they do. Okay, let's see. So there's all sorts of data where they've tried this elsewhere. It doesn't work. Oh, as an aside, do you love how the Trump administration is now floating the idea of having a lifetime cap on Medicaid? Okay. Yep. So you're like 86, 87, and it runs out. What are you going to do? I guess they just want you to die. I mean, what do you bring to the table except your decrepit, folded up, wrinkly self? And I'll be there. It's not very long. Trust me. I speak from whence I exist. So, okay. Caps on Medicaid. My joke is that it sounds like a Russian plot. Every aspect of the social safety net being dismantled? Okay. More recently, this ALEC-funded group was behind a new law in Mississippi that outsourced eligibility verification for SNAP, Medicaid, and temporary assistance, allowing people only 10 days to give written responses on technical information like liquid assets. Liquid assets. Okay, yeah, I got a quarter in the hat. Utility bills, loans, child support payments, child care costs, employee pay stubs. Yeah, try to get that from your accountant. Come on. I mean, the company accountant. Employee pay stubs and other sources of income and expenses. And the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities wrote that the group's deeply flawed analysis behind the claim that punitive changes in parents' eligibility for temporary assistance in Kansas have helped those families thrive. It's an absolute lie. As Peter Germanis, a conservative who has worked on public assistance in both the Reagan and H.W. Bush White Houses, as well as the Heritage Foundation, said in an email that the FGA is a real danger of policymaking. Their studies are seriously flawed methodologically and reflect no understanding of how various work requirements and other policies have been implemented. Yet some politicians seem to believe them. It's ALEC. They don't need to do the legislation. It's all done for them. You mean they might have to actually go to work at some point and write a bill? Huh. Well, I have a solution. If you are relying upon ALEC to get the information that you need and the actual help of writing the bill is a template. All you have to do is sign your name. And that apparently is too much effort and work. It's beyond their intellectual capabilities to be able to handle it. I have a solution. You can decide not to run for office. The Democrats will take over and we'll run government like we always do. Build a giant budget surplus so that when you guys, take reins of power again, it gives us a little bit more time for you to fritter it away.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Oh, thank you, Francis Livings, for calming me down there. I needed a bit of calming. Oh, I have failed to mention that if you go to netrootsradio.com, that is our homepage. I believe that Tom is updating the page, so some parts of it may not load properly, but that should be fixed. And I got the dialog box that says clear cache and all that. So if I do that on my various devices, I lose a lot of stuff that I don't feel like plugging in right now. But at the homepage, there are the donate, contribute buttons, and they will be updated here, I believe, real quick. And that is how we pay our bills, and we thank you for your generosity in that. Show music, of course, as I mentioned, is by Frances Livings, and you can find her work on the links provided at the show notes and links diary that I post every day on Daily Kos, where you can find me as Justice Putnam. I'm on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and you can see me on Facebook, but I usually, deal with family there. So I have other friends there, but I usually do most of my public, when I'm not on the radio and other public events, I'm usually on Twitter as that. So all podcasts can be had by way of Spreaker. Links are provided and are posted through social media. So look for that as well. Okay, this last article is by Matt Nahum out of Rare magazine. The buzz leading up to the Winter Olympics in South Korea has been mostly negative and having nothing to do with the sports themselves, whether it was Olympians preempting success by saying they would not visit the White House, or North Korea acting up. Yeah, acting up, that's one way of putting it. Or horror stories from Olympics past. Yeah, remember what they did in Sochi and what they did Putin didn't finish those bathrooms. Let's put it that way. So, and then the horror stories, of course, connected to Larry Nassar scandal. The press has not been very positive. And now you can add serious health concerns just days in advance of the opening ceremonies to this list of storylines. USA Today reported that 1,200 security guards have been sidelined after concerns were raised of spreading norovirus. This is after 21 private security staff members and 11 more fell ill. These 32 cases were confirmed to have norovirus. As recently as Sunday, workers started experiencing all of the symptoms, which is vomiting, headaches, and diarrhea. And the sick have been quarantined and replaced by active military. Well, then they'll get sick too, won't they? To address the shortfall in security forces due to the isolation, 900 military personnel have been deployed to take over the work of the civil safety personnel instead of being there at no man's land. They will work across 20 venues until all affected workforce are able to return to duty. Tests over the last 5 days on the water used for cooking and general consumption have proved negative for norovirus, but hygiene inspections will be intensified on all food and beverage facilities at the Olympics, which open tomorrow or Friday. Yes. Surveys on tap water, the food preparation staff, and food items are currently being conducted to trace the route of the transmission. Concerns for the health of incoming athletes, of course, were also raised. Whoa, yeah. At least one coach has said Team USA is sticking to recommended protocol of hand washing, beefing up on vitamins, but also limiting exposure by environmental control. What? One part of that is to try to keep the home feeling. One of the things we do is cook American food. If I was in South Korea, I'm getting kimchi. It cures all. In fact, you could wash your hands in kimchi, and I bet the pH in it would kill most viruses and bacteria. So, I don't know. Have you got kimchi in your home cooking? All right. Okay, we'll just cook American food that the guys like that's also healthy. And then controlling our environment, where we try to minimize our exposure. They're going to go through the opening ceremonies in one of those germ bubbles. I want to see that. Travel's also a risky part. Having more people around is risky, so we try to avoid that because we're Americans. We don't want to be with the world. Okay. And really keeping that sense of family tight. We're taking care of each other. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to make light of the health concerns. But the Olympics is supposed to bring the world together, not to set up barriers because you're afraid of shaking hands. And maybe we should have a better handle on disease control so that we wouldn't have to fear the idea of spreading diseases because we just want to make friends. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today. And we will be back here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little spicy. That's how we like it. And do stay tuned for more breaking news throughout the day. Tom Hartman coming up about 6 minutes after the hour. Democracy Now! After that. Randy Rhodes after that. Malloy later on tonight. A reprise of David Waldman and Kagro X in the morning with Joan McCarter and Greg Dworkin tonight after Malloy. Well, after the broadcast, and then David, the reprise. What else could you ask for? Well, we have even more than you could even consider asking for. And with that said, we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.